Okay, so today we're going to be discussing a very interesting topic that was keeping me up last night. It was either that or my severe sleep deprivation. But anyways, if you want to cure my sleep apnea, be sure to drop a sub, like, and tell me who's your favorite shinobi. But anyways, let's jump straight into it. The topic of today is Naruto and Sasuke versus Boruto and Kawaki.
Do me a favor, please. Get out of here. Get out of here, man!
Just to clarify, we're going to be talking about Boroshiki and Kawashiki, specifically around Boruto chapter 66, because we've seen Boroshiki at multiple different progressions of otozification, and at the time that Boruto met Ishiki, he was around 70 to 80% complete, and previous showcases of this form had been presumably weaker than when we see him in chapter 66 against Kawashiki. Also, base Boruto and Kawaki as kids would get absolutely slaughtered by Naruto and Sasuke, so I'm not even going to talk about that. We're also going to be referring to Naruto and Sasuke, both post and pre-nerf in the Boruto era. Now, the main reason why I'm covering this is because it's been a common narrative that eventually the newer generations overcome the older ones. You know, we've seen that time and time again, but this theme may have crept up on us a little bit faster than we anticipated. Now, starting off with pre-nerfed Naruto and Sasuke, let's try to power scale them a little bit so we're kind of on the same page about how powerful these guys are in the first place, and let's cover some of their more commonly used abilities at this time. Now, Naruto and Sasuke towards the end of the war got significant buffs that enabled them to overshadow Madara and even somewhat contend with Kage Otsutsuki, and managed to successfully seal her away with some help. Now, whether you believe Naruto still has his 6 past stage abilities after the time skip, that's kind of up to you to decide. I do have a video covering that one and my personal belief, but opinions aside, it's pretty self-evident that both Naruto and Sasuke become significantly more powerful than they were at the end of Shippuden, right? There's a lot of evidence that kind of points in this direction. First of all, after the time skip, Naruto has both halves of Kurama, which in and of itself should be a pretty massive buff. He's also briefly able to contend with and swap hands with used Momoshiki in base before utilizing his KCM. Keep in mind that this was after getting his chakra drained for an extended period of time, illustrated by Momoshiki's comments on how long the extraction was taking. Then KCM alongside Sasuke, they're able to compete with Momoshiki in Taijutsu before employing some other techniques such as the Rasen Shuriken and Sasuke's ability to switch plays with the Rinnegan. Now, towards the end of this fight, Naruto's so confident that they completely outclassed him to the point that he lets Boruto deal the finishing blow using Naruto's chakra. Now, for those arguing that Boruto somehow managed to be the determining factor in this fight because of his Jogan, first of all, Naruto wouldn't have let Boruto deal the final blow as he would have been more cautious, and second of all, the chakra came predominantly from Naruto as Boruto kind of points out how heavy it is, questions what his dad did to get to this point and to have that much power. Now, alongside Naruto in this fight, Sasuke did a lot and seemingly matched Naruto in terms of speed and power, and also aided in the creation of the majestic attire Susanoo, which was a collective effort as well. They also should be more or less equals as they are in the same tier of power, illustrated in this fight and time again. They actually may be more equal here than in the Valley of the End at the end of Shippuden, where Naruto was arguably more powerful than him there because he lacked bloodlust the entire fight, and Sasuke was amped towards the end by the tailed beasts and still failed in killing Naruto. Now, regardless, the point is that over time, Naruto was pointed to become a little bit more rusty by Kurama, which does not mean that he's weaker by any means than he was at the Valley of the End, but more so he's rusty in comparison to his prime, which could have been several years later, for example, around the time he was 19 during the movie The Last. Also, during Naruto's downtime as Hokage, Sasuke was still out there atoning for his sins, doing more missions, trying to uncover some information on the Otsutskis. Now, they both became more powerful in Shippuden, but all I'm saying is that Sasuke's more activeness could kind of account for the slight imbalance of their power previously, and now they should be pretty much more or less equals, both narratively speaking and as shown in their feats of strength. Now, I'm not saying a fight at this time between them would result in a stalemate. I'm just saying that they're in the same tier of power in terms of strength, which is pretty self-evident. Also, these would show no merit if I didn't compare Momoshiki to Kaguya, because I was doing a lot of comparing them to Momoshiki. Now, this topic has been covered time and time again, but for those who are still unsure, Momoshiki in base is presumably more powerful than Kage Otsutsuki. Now, this is narratively implied as Kage was scared of her people and thought it necessary to build an entire army. This is stated multiple times, such as in the anime, in the conversation with Urashiki, Momoshiki, and Kinshiki. It was also implied in Shippuden and stated in the Boruto novels when Sasuke stated that, in other words, they were enemies that even Kaguya wouldn't even be able to oppose without an army. Again, these are more statements to the reader and statements to the audience, and there are those, as well as Sasuke's additional statements about Momoshiki and Kinshiki being threats above Kaguya. It is again implied by Momoshiki's superiority complex and his comments that he makes on potentially having to punish Kaguya himself. Momoshiki also keeps getting more and more powerful as he consumes chakra pills, even on their first encounter with Naruto. He later even absorbs Kinshiki, so apart from the narratives, he's also able to contend with Naruto and Sasuke, which would seem like circular logic if you believe that Naruto lost six past power and became weaker, but the exception is that Sasuke shows no loss in strength or abilities, and Naruto is still on par with him. Now, I would go a little bit more in depth on Momoshiki and Kaguya, but, you know, there's a lot of videos on there. I could even make my own kind of explaining them, but let's try to jump a little bit more into the meat before this gets a little out of hand. Now that we covered Naruto and Sasuke's ever-growing strength, let's talk a little bit about Borushiki and Kawashiki, so we can kind of get on the same page of how strong they are in terms of strength and speed. Now, unlike Naruto and Sasuke, Borushiki and Kawashiki are not presumed equals, right? I'm gonna make an educated assumption that seems generally accepted by the community regarding Borushiki being about 82% of Momoshiki's power. I'm using this number because that's how far the ossification process in Boruto was before Momoshiki restored him in Boruto chapter 67. I'm also assuming that this is about 82% of transformed Momoshiki's power, because I believe Boruto got the karma right around the time that Momoshiki was about to die, and he was transformed at this point. I also don't believe that they made any contact where he would have gotten the karma beforehand, but I could be wrong. Also, he does appear in base when he directly talks to Boruto, but that doesn't necessarily signify if he still has Kinshiki's additional chakra reserves. Now, either way, the outcome isn't really changed too much, but that's just something to keep in mind. The outcome of the fight might be slightly different if you're considering the fact that Borushiki is around 82% of fused or non-fused Momoshiki, or if he's even that number at all. Also, going off of the 82%, because it's pretty difficult to determine exactly how powerful they are, because there's not much direct power scaling we can do, because we don't see Borushiki or Kawashiki in action too often, apart from like pretty minor instances against each other later on in the manga. I mean, he does kill Boro, but we don't really know how strong he is compared to Naruto and Sasuke. We could use statements comparing Boro to Delta that state that he's stronger and compare Delta to Naruto, but that's a little bit of flawed reasoning, as the statements about Boro being stronger than Delta, there's a good chance that they could actually be incorrect because of how strong and how well Delta did against Naruto. Regardless, it's highly unlikely that Borushiki would be as powerful as full Momoshiki, as he was a full Otsutsuki with his own power, whereas Borushiki was Momoshiki in an incomplete Otsutsuki body. Only in that regard, if we forget about Kawashiki, Naruto and Sasuke would easily take the cake on this one, because they would essentially just replaying first fight with Momoshiki, but just like a weaker variation of him. But now we gotta consider Kawashiki as well, and due to the events that happened in Boruto chapter 66, we do know that he's significantly more powerful, and although Borushiki did moderately well towards the beginning, Kawashiki would have killed him in a matter of panels if Naruto didn't really intervene, but we could have determined that outcome even before glancing at the fight, and I'll tell you why. If Borushiki is a portion of Momoshiki's power, then naturally Kawashiki would be a portion of Ishiki's power, and obviously Ishiki is way more powerful than Momoshiki. If you don't believe me, look at how both of their fights turned out against Naruto and Sasuke back to back. A nerfed Ishiki in a Jigen vessel was able to massacre Sasuke and Naruto, whereas an amped Momoshiki still lost. Therefore, roughly 82% of Ishiki, Kawashiki, who still has access to Ishiki's abilities and dojutsu, and 82% of Momoshiki, Borushiki, who has the prior experience of Momoshiki, should be able to easily defeat Naruto and Sasuke. Again, this is mainly because you're having a slightly nerfed Ishiki, essentially, with less experience with the abilities, and a slightly nerfed Momoshiki, whereas a nerfed Ishiki by himself was still able to wash Naruto and Sasuke. I hope that kind of makes sense. Before you guys mention it below, I know that Kawaki has a new, separate weaponized Karma Seal, and he's no longer a vessel, but his abilities are still identical to Ishiki, so it's pretty clear that he still pertains all the power from his previous karma. Now, the game changer here would be the utilization of Baryon mode. I'm pretty sure you're all aware. Now, this is because it is actually stated by Kurama that Naruto was actually stronger than Ishiki during their exchange, but it drained both of their life forces combined, with the fact that Kurama and Naruto's chakras were being drained due to being slammed together by a process similar to nuclear fusion, and it was expended shortly thereafter. This alone was able to take Ishiki from essentially completely fine, right? I mean, he still had his time draining, but he was fine. He wasn't really worried at all, to being on death's door. But if Ishiki was a percentage of his actual power, and this power was being wielded by Kawaki, who has no previous experience utilizing that full power, most likely, Kawashiki would lose to Baryon mode Naruto. I think that is pretty self-evident, that's pretty clear, and Naruto still might have time to aid Sasuke, who may not even use excessive difficulty with Borushiki, who is a portion of Momoshiki's power, because again, if this fight happened, I would assume that Naruto would kind of go up against Kawaki, whereas Boruto against Sasuke. It's very clear narratively, this would make a lot of sense, Sasuke being Boruto's teacher, and him mentioning that he'll do what it takes to stop Boruto. This has been pointed out even pretty recently in the manga as well, and I mean recently as in around Boruto chapter 69, and obviously Naruto with his connection to Kawaki. I think this matchup would make a lot of sense here. I think it would be important to point out that the only reason that Sasuke lost his Rinnegan to Boruto Boroshiki, in the first place, was mainly due to unanticipation of the attack, and he was unaware of the imminent danger posed by Boruto at this time. So having said that, without Baryon mode, it would be pretty much a wash in Boruto and Kawaki's favor, and with Baryon mode, I actually really do see it going in Naruto and Sasuke's favor, you know, 9 out of 10 times. And again, Naruto and Sasuke do have a plethora of abilities, and that's a significant advantage that they have over Boroshiki and Kawashiki. But you gotta keep in mind that even all of those abilities didn't really stop Jigen, you know, in their exchange. So again, I do think this would come out to primarily brute strength. But anyways, let's move on to post-nerf. Now, obviously, we just talked about pre-nerf, so the post-nerf, the odds would be slim to none in Naruto and Sasuke's favor. They could potentially have a chance against Boroshiki without the Rinnegan or any QB-related abilities, but, you know, they would get slapped by Ishiki Jr. in a matter of seconds, and there wouldn't really be much hope. Again, we can't really determine exactly how powerful Adult Stage Mode Naruto is, but we did see Adult Stage Mode Naruto in the Boruto era, and he kind of got tossed by Boruto. So I feel like it is super clear by those series of events that Boroshiki should completely outclass Stage Mode Naruto. Now, if you guys want me to talk about Boroshiki versus nerfed Naruto and Sasuke specifically, because remember, this fight also includes Kawashiki, so I mean, it's a little bit of a different exchange if we do that. Be sure to comment down below and let me know what videos you guys want me to talk about next, because hopefully I'll eventually be able to move up in the world and out of my mom's basement and into the attic.